So good evening, everybody. Today, I very proudly present Mr. Jayant Mehta in front of all of you. Mr. Jayant Mehta is a graduate from the National Law School, Bangalore, and thereafter he joined one of the most illustrious firms in the country, Amarchand Mangaldas. And for working for more than 2 years in the firm, he has been independently practicing in the Supreme Court of India. So, sir, I welcome you. I welcome you on behalf of Team Law Spot. And it's a sheer privilege and honor to have you amongst us today. Thank you so much for coming, sir.
Kirtika, it's my privilege. It's my honor. Thank you for having me here. Just a few notes of correction. I was with Amarchand for 3 years, and then I was with Mr. Parag Tripaঠি's chamber for a couple of years, and then I became independent.
And then you started independently. I stand.
Yeah, and I hope, then that's all right. That's perfectly fine. Thank you.
So, sir, if we start, how did the idea of becoming a lawyer struck you? When did you decide that you wanted to be a lawyer?
Okay. When I decided to become a lawyer, was a point where I didn't want to go into medicine or engineering. And I wanted to join the services, but I couldn't get through for reasons beyond my control. So I wanted to do something different. And it helped that my family is into law. Both my parents are lawyers, so it did help to that extent in decision making. But yeah, that's when I decided to do law. When I didn't get through the services.
And then, sir, so you gave the law school entrance exam way back in 1995. So what was the atmosphere around that time, preparing for the entrance exam for NLS? How was the experience then?
Well, to be very frank with you, at that point of time, NLS was not the brand NLS as we know it today. Not many people knew of it. And I was studying in Madhya Pradesh, and none had heard about it in that state. And I read about NLS in a newspaper. We used to read newspapers at that time. We no longer do. So I read about NLS in a newspaper, and I wrote a letter to the registrar explaining my interest in getting and seeking information from law school. Luckily for me, he responded. He sent me a prospectus, and I filled it up. There was no coaching. There was nothing. But I had done quite well in UPSC, so therefore I was reasonably confident that if the normal course of the general knowledge, English, maths, usual subjects come, one should be able to manage. So it wasn't as high profile as it's now, but it was good fun. It was good fun.
And sir, talking about those 5 years, how were the internships lined up? Were they as competitive as like today we have to follow up with law firms and lawyers to get an internship? What was the experience back then for getting internships, for doing internships?
I think I joined law school when it was just about, people were realizing what law school is all about.
Correct.
The first batch came out of law school in 93. 93. I joined in 95.
Right.
So by then the first batch had done quite well. So when you were in law school, it was easier for you to get through internships. You didn't really have to follow up as much as you do now. But because you had only one law school there of the pattern of National Law School Bangalore. So things were easier. You wrote to the councils or the law firms, and 9 out of 10 you got through them in the first call. Later on, I think by the time I was in the 5th year, that's when things started to get a little competitive. And because by then a lot of other law schools had started coming up,
right,
or were in the talks,
right.
So by then and then thereafter, and now that's history. So it was easier. It was much easier than it is now to get through internships. Also, at the same time, the firms were at that point of time were not as big as they are now. There were the Indian market had not really opened up as much as it is today. So therefore, it worked both ways. I mean, you had firms who responded in time, and at the same time, there were not as many options as you have today. But it was a lot less competitive.
So now we see that a lot of national law schools are coming up. We have examples like there are more than 2 national law schools in a single state, like we see in Maharashtra. And most of the law schools, they do not have proper funding also from the state government. As in, the state government is of the opinion that the concept of national law school is that they have to self-finance. But that is because of that, what happens is the students have to pay a large amount of fees. And the quality, the faculty, everything is out in the open. So what is your opinion? Is the multiplication of NLUs diluting the image that probably there was 20 years down the line?
Difficult question to answer. But I think, all in all, there is no doubt that number of law schools have multiplied.
Right.
There is no doubt that law is in fact, everybody wants to be a lawyer. Having said that, what the real problem, as I see it, is the lack of faculty.
Lack of?
Faculty.
Faculty.
Lack of good, yes. Lack of law faculty, where the teachers, I mean, where you have good professors, law teachers teaching you something. That is one big problem. And of course, that is correlated with lack of funding. If you fund well, you get good people.
Correct.
Jindal is an example, I believe.
Correct. Absolutely.
So funding, of course, is a major drawback. And I think it's time that the governments in the states started doing their bit as they do for other universities. They started doing their bit for law schools. Having said that, another disturbing trend that I see now is not only are the law schools mushrooming, but even the fee that they charge is going through the roof. Legal education is going beyond the capacity of a normal middle-class household. That has to be changed, because you can't allow the profession of law to be a place where only the rich and famous of the society, or the cream of the society, in terms of financial capacity, not in terms of intellectual capacity, but in terms of financial capacity, simply land up. Law is not a luxurious profession. It's a profession which has to subserve the common man. And for that, you need law schools which are able to impart legal education at a reasonable cost. And for that, you need.
Sir, this particular point of expensive legal education brings me to my next question. I have heard Mr. N.R. Madhav Menon saying that the reason why they brought the concept of national law universities was to get good people into litigation. But now, as a recent law graduate, the problem which I face is that I spend around 10 to 12 lakhs for legal education, despite the fact that I came from a national law university. Many of my batchmates had to take an education loan to fund their education. But if they get into litigation, they do not get much monetary support from the seniors. And that is the reason why they are forced to take up law firm jobs, and not even good law firm jobs in which they will have to do menial jobs such as photocopy, or for example, page numbering. I mean, there is no problem with that. But the actual reason why the national law schools were brought, that gets faded out because of this mismatch in the amount of investment which a student does and the return the student is getting when he is getting into litigation.
I couldn't agree more with you. You're absolutely right. If you make the law education beyond the means of a normal household, you of course end up producing lawyers whose first aim is to recoup the cost of education.
Correct.
And that puts burden on them. That puts burden on the system. And I have no doubt that that drives people to law firms. And of course, that drives people to do all kinds of things, which, as you corrected yourself, are not menial, but at the same time, a professionally qualified lawyer would like to do that and more. Not just that and more. All of us have, I mean, having said that, all of us have gone through the drill, as I call it, of photocopying, page numbering. That is something that has, it's not menial, it's something which is a part of your profession. Yes, so coming back to the question, I think it is time that the lawyers as a community started taking up the cause of making legal education affordable. I see a great disconnect, and which is a very disturbing disconnect between the profession of law and the education of law. Earlier, the legends in our profession were all, or a large number of them, were part-time law teachers as well. There was a time when you were allowed to practice law and also to teach law. So that made that connect, that ensured that connect between the profession, the practicality, and the theory. But somehow, for reasons unknown to me, that was discontinued. As a result, you have no connect between the profession of law and the education of law. So the profession of law is completely oblivious to the problems that the education of law faces. It's time that the legal fraternity, and by that I mean the teachers, I mean the law students, I mean lawyers like you and me, we sat together and made another, we start another movement for ensuring that the legal education comes at a reasonable cost and doesn't become the preserve of the rich.
Sir, I cannot agree more. So for a young law graduate, what is the ideal path to be successful as a lawyer? For example, should a young law graduate start with the trial court, then move to the appellate court, or join a law firm and move directly to the Supreme Court like you did?
I believe that there is no ideal path.
Right.
There is no one path that suits all. You have to choose your own path, and you would choose your path depending on what you want to do. Whether you want to litigate, you want to go into an in-house corporate world, you want to join a law firm, you want to do policy work, and so on. So first thing to ask yourself is, what is it that you would want to do? Or how is it that you see yourself 10 years down the line? Because 10 years is the period that you would ordinarily take to settle down in any field, whether it's a law firm or it's policy work or it's litigation. So where do you see 10 years from yourself 10 years from now? One. Second, having chosen the path that you would want to take for yourself, in the sense of where you want to get, you have to see as to what suits the circumstances that you're placed in. I'll give you an example. I joined Amarchal for a variety of reasons. Of course, the most important being that it being a premier law firm of the country. But equally important was the reason that I could not financially support myself post-law in Delhi. Now, I put a question to myself that if Suppose I were to, if I were able to support myself financially in Delhi, would I have not joined Amarchand or done something else? Difficult question to answer. Life doesn't give you a linear answer to any question. So you have to look at the circumstances that you're placed in. 3 is within what you want to do and your circumstances, what are the options that are available to you? Now, I had the good fortune of getting an offer from a top tier law firm. Does it mean that if someone were not to join a top tier law firm, he or she can't be a good litigator? The answer is a no. So therefore, you have to look at the options. What is most important is that you should be comfortable doing what you're doing. Because in this profession, you would be required to put in long hours, a lot of hard work. The returns, depending on where you are, what path you've chosen for yourself, would not be immediate, would take some time. And most important is that you should not lose hope. It sounds very theoretical. I don't know whether I've been able to answer your question, but the point that I wish to make very simply is this. There is not one path that can be said to be the path to take.
Right.
Every one of us has to chart our own path.
Correct.
And that's the best part of it. That's the best part of it. You can experiment, you have the time, you put in your hard work, and then your returns are yours. So please don't go by my suggestion to, or my advice to anybody who puts me this question is, please don't go by what A did or B did or C did or D did not do. Go by what you're comfortable with. Think for yourself in a way that you are mentally comfortable doing what you're doing. Once you're comfortable, that's when you put in your best. And then, of course, once you start on a particular path, it just unfolds before you, step after step after step after step.
Sir, so if we take this question in a different way, let's divide this question. And for example, that you've been practicing at the Supreme Court, at the Apex Court for a long while now. Do you think that for somebody, if 20 years down the line, if for example, I am a young lawyer, if I have to practice, if I start practicing directly at the Supreme Court, would I benefit if I had prior trial experience? For example, does trial court experience help in the practice at the Supreme Court level?
Most certainly it does. Most certainly it does. Supreme Court is, of course, the last court that you have in the country. But approaching a brief requires you to have experience of a trial lawyer. This is particularly about civil, criminal, and commercial litigation.
Right.
Unless you have trial experience, you would not know how the matter has developed. What is the actual issue that you need to agitate before the court? So when someone asks me whether he should start from the Supreme Court and not have any trial experience at all, well, it's possible. It depends on from one individual to another. But my advice is, unless you do trial, unless you have done original side work, it'll be difficult for you to sustain yourself in the long run in all kinds of matters in the Supreme Court.
Right. And sir, similarly for, if we consider the case of arbitrations, you've been an arbitrator yourself. You've done a number of arbitration. So for young lawyers like us, if we have to take up arbitration matters, how do we correctly approach? Because I, for a young lawyer like me, it is very difficult to convince a big company, or for example even a small company, to hand over their arbitration matter. So for an independent litigator, how do you suggest that if we need to have some experience at the arbitration, in arbitration, so how do we approach uh, the clients in that matter?
Okay, so let me sort of expand the scope of your question for me to be able to answer it effectively. How do you approach commercial work,
Right, absolutely.
commercial legal work,
Absolutely.
which includes arbitration, which includes other subjects? My advice would be to join an office which does that kind of work.
Okay.
You can't on day one land up with the clients that you want to have immediately after law. You have to join an office which gives you the grounding for that kind of work. Once you have the grounding, once you have the experience, with it you will also learn how to handle a client.
Right.
More importantly, you will learn how to handle a matter. With that experience, there would come a point of time where your office may not want to continue with some of the clients for a variety of reasons. The matter would be too small. It may not be attractive enough for the office. The senior may have no time. Or the senior may genuinely want to give you a brief. With that would be your beginning. Most of my friends, including myself, we've all begun in that way. You work in an office, the clients look at your work, and the clients are very discerning. So are your seniors. They would know, they can separate grain from chaff in no time. So the clients and your senior would, if you put in hard work, have faith in you. And the beginning would be slow but steady. You will start getting matters, and then small will become medium, will become big. And that's how it goes on.
Right.
So, but one should not expect, having said that, you should not expect to have all the golden eggs all at once. You should be slow. It's very important to have your faith, to give yourself that kind of space and time to gain that experience. Because it is important to have a matter, it is important to have a client, but it is actually equally important to do that matter well and to retain that client. You may get a client for one matter, but if you misconduct it, or if you don't conduct it well, that client would not come back to you. In this profession, your reputation spreads through word of mouth. So if you have done well for one client, not only will that client come to you with another matter, but that client would put in a word to several others who would then keep you on their radar, and as and when they need you, they'll come to you. So it's very important to first have the foundation, first have the grounding, and then jump on the bandwagon of having a client and conducting a case.
Sir, one last question which I would like to put forward is, LLMs is a very in thing nowadays. A lot of my batchmates, they prefer going to a law school out of the country to get their LLM. I mean, going to a lot of my batchmates, even if they're not getting into an Ivy League college, they say that the brand image of an LLM degree would help them in the long run. So first, I would like to have your opinion on LLM, number one. Number two, how important and how beneficial do you think are judicial clerkships? A lot of my juniors, my batchmates are pursuing judicial clerkships. So how do you think how beneficial are they for a fresh law graduate to pursue?
Okay, so I'll answer your question step by step. First, the LLM part. There is no fixed answer there. LLM works. If so, to what extent and how? It's very difficult. Why I say that there's no linear answer to that question is because this profession is a very different kind of, or different kettle of fish. It depends on how much of hard work you put in. Okay, for that, LLM may help because it certainly hones your theory. If not practice, it certainly hones your theory, and it gives you a certain expertise in theory in a particular subject. But I've had friends who have gone abroad to do their LLMs and come back and join law firms. They got disenchanted with the code going work, and very were comfortable joining a law firm. But as I said, to each his own. LLM, the decision to do an LLM should not, according to me, be dictated by the fancy of an LLM, but by what you want to do and whether it helps you in doing what you want to do. A lot of the time, the decision to do an LLM is made because you just want to give them yourself another year before you actually sit down and decide as to what you want to do.
Right.
So you want the confusion to continue, or you don't want the decision making to come to you immediately, and then you somehow find LLM is one way out to stay away from the decision making. But I've seen a couple of my friends and lawyers who have done their LLM and they're exceedingly well qualified. But that's just one part of it. It's no passport to success. So doing LLM is no guarantee that you will become a Dr. Singhi or a Kapil Sibal either overnight or after a few years. No guarantee. It all boils down to how you conduct yourself in your office, in the court, with the client, and in your public life. Each one is important. How the client perceives you, how much of work you put in your chamber, how you present yourself before the court, how the court perceives you, how you conduct yourself outside the court are all equally important part of a lawyer's life. So if you have the option of going for an LLM, my advice would be do it, but not in a way so as to delay the decision making of what you want to do ultimately post law, but as an aid to hone your study of law post your law school. It certainly helps. No one can say it's not helpful, but just as you take a lot of effort in choosing your law school for your graduation, you must be equally careful in choosing a good university for your post-graduation. Coming to the next part of your question, which is, I'm sorry, I think I've lost track.
Sir, about judicial clerkships.
Yeah, but clerkship, yeah. So, but judicial clerkship is a very, very engaging and I would say a very important role that one can have. Why? Because you see all aspects of litigation unfolding before you. You see how a judge approaches the brief, which is before him. You see how the two lawyers, one on each side, or at times several on each side, approach the question. And you have a whole, if I may say, it's a whole spectrum of what a litigator's life is before you. So you will have some aspects which would be labored by a lawyer, but the judge may not really be interested in those aspects. And when you go back to the judge in the evening and he gives you certain issues to research, that's when you will realize that, look, I think the lawyer was barking up the wrong tree. He was actually laboring on a point that he shouldn't have. Rather, he should have labored on a point which he didn't, or did, but not so effectively. So at the end of it, you realize you gain the experience of how to approach a brief, how to conduct yourself in court, what you should do and what you should not do, because both are equally important.
Correct.
And how the decision making, the judicial decision making, is approached by judges in our country. So clerkship with a good judge is a great idea. It's a great idea. We have some of the very, very hardworking judges in the country, and some of them are remarkable, outstanding. So if someone happens to clerk with them, I think it adds a huge dimension, a big dimension to your career. Is what I would say.
Sir, any parting words for all the young lawyers and people who are getting out of the law school? Any message which you would like to send to all our viewers?
Yeah, a couple of them. First is my own experience of what I find remarkable in the students who are coming out these days. You are much more focused than we were when we came out of law schools. Two, the avenues that you have before you are several times more than what we had then. Three, the kind of work that you can do and the time within which you can do is remarkable, in the sense that at the time, I'm not so old, but at the time when we were coming out of law school, we didn't have Google. We didn't have the internet connectivity, was not as strong as it is today, or as common as it is today. You still have had electronic printers. Your computers were slower than they are today. But you guys have that advantage of having these gadgets around you and doing things much quicker than how they could have been done about 10, 12 or 15 years back. So make use of it, and there is no end to where you can reach. Couple of aspects that you need to look into, according to me, is what I find is this profession is all about expression. Okay. Now I get a couple of emails every now and then from students wanting to intern with my office. Some of them uh, communicate beautifully. They make the point, they tell you who they are, they tell you what they want to do, and whether your office would want to take them as intern or not. But most of the emails or most of the communications I find are lacking focus. They would be writing to me, but they would say, "Dear madam," for some reason I do not know. Then they would say, we have heard about your law firm. Well, I don't have a law firm, I have counsel practice. So the point that I'm making is, you are what you write. You know, whether it comes to your pleading before a court, or your communication to a client, your communication to a senior, or for that matter, your communication to your colleague. So what is important is, you must work on how you communicate. And I find that communication today has become, while we have all the gadgets around us, but it's become a problem. We are much less formal than what we should be. And by formality, I don't mean that one should follow a certain protocol very strictly. What I mean is having some kind of a command over the language that you use. Don't use words that have no meaning or can be easily need not be used. Second, you have to take yourself seriously before someone else takes you seriously. Okay. Now, I find interns who come in who would have who would not be too interested while they write to you saying that we are very keen on interning with your office, but when they actually come over to intern, you can see the lack of interest in them. In some of them. Some of them are remarkable, outstanding. In fact, most are outstanding, but some of them are not all that. So the point is that first impressions matter in our profession. When you walk in for a client meeting, the way the client looks at you, the way you look at the client matters. It goes a long way. The way you make a pleading and the judge reads it, and if there's a good pleading, the judge would certainly look at the name of the person who drafted it and who's filing it. So most important is, you must work on your communication skills. The way you conduct yourself, the way you present yourself in court, it matters. 3, I find everybody defining litigation as simply being able to stand up before a judge and arguing a matter. We must realize arguing a matter is, of course, the most glamorous part of it all. It allows you to sort of present yourself to the court and to perform what you're trained to do. But that is only 20% of what the matter requires. The first step is to know what you should be doing in a particular matter. That comes with your fundamentals being sound, that comes with hard work, and that comes with honesty. You should not tell a client that he has a remarkable case if you find that actually he has no case at all. So once you know what your facts are, then comes the next stage of how you present them. If you present them well, you will know of those facts what would appeal to a judge. And then comes the actual delivery. So these stages one should keep in mind before you simply want to just get up and argue a matter. I think that's all that I had to Those are my two bits.
Thank you so much, sir. This was an
My
amazing.
pleasure. Thank you for having me here. And I do hope that it would help someone who watches it to clear
Absolutely.
their minds.
These words of
Thank you
wisdom
so
will
much.
definitely help all of us, even young law graduates.
And good luck. Good luck for your venture. I hope it does well. And I'm sure it will.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.